Hi guys, and welcome to this next video in the flight controller therapy series. In this video, auto launch. We're looking at the iNav auto launch system and just going over how to do a quick setup of it. I always used to launch these things wrong. I'm admitting that now. I used to use what people refer to as a shake and bake, which is you trigger auto launch, shake the craft so the motor spins, so launch mode is already detected and working, and then you throw it up. Mark Hoffman made a very good video a couple of weeks ago about why this is really bad. So I'll put a link to that. If I can't stick it up in that corner somewhere, I'll put it in the description. But it's well worth watching that video. So I decided to try and do this one properly. And I set it up 2 days ago. I went flying yesterday, and it's the best auto launch experience I've had. Before doing the shake and bake, I was getting maybe 70%. So it's a decent number. But I did experience a few craft where they'd start launching and then all of a sudden go off in the wrong direction, usually towards the ground, or they'd go up and then straight back down. So this did none of that. It was literally just a gentle throw, and it just climbed into the sky. It was perfect. So the other thing that I learned, I was probably setting the motor up too high, because you just think, I'll just give it full beans and it will just fly up quicker. But it doesn't really work like that. If you have this spinning too much, you're going to induce more torque roll. You could also induce more vibrations that upsets the gyro. So it's better to have the right amount of throttle than too much. So in this video, I'll show how to get the right amount of throttle. Oh yeah, if you've got the right amount of throttle, you're not wasting energy. So if you're a person that likes flying long range, wants really high efficiency, then when you set your launch throttle, you want as little throttle as possible to get you up in the air. So getting it set right is the best idea. So for this, when I set it up, I followed Mark's documentation. So I'll also be linking to the documentation in the description. And what we'll do now is I'll get this hooked up to the computer, and we'll go through a couple of the key commands that you need to change. There's a couple where the default values are really not very good at all. So we need to change those. And then I'll show how to do the hover test to get the right motor, the right amount of power for the motor. So we'll head over to the desk. I'll get this plugged into iNav, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so we've got iNav, and we're just going to connect up to the model. This is with version of the configurator 2.4.1, and I'm pretty certain it's the same in 2.5, but none of the launch mode stuff is actually in the configurator for a GUI point of view. It'd be nice if it was in advanced tuning or something like that, but at the moment it's all just in the CLI. So to demonstrate what we have, I'm just going to get everything. So get fw_launch, and that will return all the launch mode stuff. So as you can see, there's not really a lot to it. I can actually fit it all on one screen. And these here are the commands that we're going to need to have a look at and change. Some of them are absolutely fine as they are. The acceleration is absolutely fine default. So what that does is detect how hard the model moves. So that's looking for just over 1.8 G of movement. So for most of the time, that's going to be absolutely fine. If you've got something big and heavy, then maybe you need to lower that. But ideally, you want that as high as possible where you can launch successfully. So the first thing to mention is actually the next one in the list, which is max angle. Now, this is not the angle of the launch. This is the angle that you throw the aircraft. So by default, I believe it's a case of 45 degrees, which for most things is going to be absolutely fine. But if you are one of these guys who throw the thing over your head, then you'll definitely need to put this at 180. The next thing that is in the list is launch throttle. Now, I've actually changed this. This is the second time we're recording this video. First time had audio problems again. So this, if you look on my channel, there's a video I made. I actually made it yesterday, but it will be a bit of time back when this video comes out. And I had that set at 1700. I've lowered it today, and I'm going to test it tomorrow and see what we can go down to. As I said, the lower you can get it with successful launches is the best throttle. So with my 3S pack, which on the mini AR wing, I run 3S and 4S. So I'm going to do all the launch stuff with 3S, get that as low as possible. So when I put the 4S in, it's going to be a nice value. It's not going to try and torque roll or anything like that. But I'm going to show, after we've gone through all this stuff, I'll show how to get that rough value. And again, you'll get the value, but take it to the field and test it. You may find that it launches absolutely fine. You might be able to lower it a little bit. You might find that you do have one that's not so great, so you want it a bit more power. But it's one of these you just need to experiment with. But you can get a very good idea in iNav of where the baseline is going to be. So after that, we have the idle throttle. And this is how fast the motor spins when you first enable launch mode. So with launch mode, there's two ways you can have it. You can have it permanently enabled, or you can have it on a switch. If it's permanently enabled, when you arm, launch mode is triggered. Sorry, triggered is probably the wrong word because that's when you throw it. But launch mode is enabled when you just flick your arm switch. Or if you have it on a switch, it's then enabled. Once you've enabled launch mode, when you raise your throttle to the cruise throttle for when you've come out of the launch, that's when the motor will start idling. So if you set this to 1,000, it won't spin at all. It would just be motor off. In the document, Mark recommends between 1,200 and 1,400. So I went right in the middle, and it seems to work quite nicely. When you throw it, it just gives that little bit of propulsion before the next stage kicks in. So for bigger planes, you could have it slightly higher to give you a bit more help to get it launched. The next one we're going to look at is motor delay. Now, this is the amount of time it takes after launch has been detected before it starts the motor. By default, this is set to 500, which, unless you've got something like a glider, like a motor glider, it's not going to be quick enough. Especially with something small, as soon as you throw it, it's going to start losing altitude. So you want to get this a bit shorter, but around 200 is fine. Where this mini AR is only 600 mil, it's small. I've put it down a bit lower. Could probably go down to 100, but to be honest, 150 is working fine. I wouldn't really go lower than 100. Unless you have a tractor. So if your plane has the propeller on the front, so it's well out of the way of your fingers, maybe even something like a Bixler or a Ranger, so the propeller's right up out of the way, nowhere near your hands, then you could set that to 0 or 0. So as soon as it detects the launch, it will kick up that the full power to the motor. So the next one down is the spin up time. Now, what this is, once this 150 milliseconds is gone, it then kicks this in. Now, this spin up time is how long it takes for the motor to get from your idle throttle to the launch throttle. And the reason for that, rather than just going straight to launch, is to give a bit of less stress to your ESC and motor. If you just kick it straight up full power, it's not good for the power system. So having a slight gradual increase, I mean, we're talking 100 milliseconds. It's a really small amount of time anyway. So 100 is absolutely fine for most things. If your model has got a bigger propeller, so maybe 8 to 10 inch, then you could increase it to 200. And if you go, bigger again, then maybe increase it a little bit more. But we're still talking about really small amount of time, so it doesn't really hurt your launch because it's still building up the speed to the motor or to the propeller throughout that time. So the next one we're going to look at is climb angle. Now, this again is very much dependent on your aircraft. So a bigger plane with not maybe so much power to weight ratio, you want to keep this low. So maybe like 15 to 18 degrees. That would be for something maybe like a mini Talon, where, you know, the mini Talon, they actually recommend that when you throw it fast but straight, so you don't actually give it any angle. So to have a low climb rate for something like a mini Talon would be ideal, because then it can build up speed rather than having to get the altitude as well. But for something with a much bigger power to weight ratio, again, depending on how you've got your motor set, you could have that climb angle to a much higher degree. I mean, I've set mine to 20. I could easily probably bump that up to 25, but it's working nice. It's a nice slope, so I don't see any reason to change it. You'll see in a minute when I do the hover test that the mini AR wing is got a really good thrust to weight ratio. Even on 3S, it's around half throttle. It's at that point where it just wants to sort of hover or even progress onwards. So you're almost looking maybe, I don't know, but if it's half throttle, I mean, it's not going to be 2 to 1, but it's going to be a decent, maybe 1.5 to 1 thrust ratio. I mean, something like a, you know, high powered, fast plane like a fun jet with a big in runner, you could have that at 45 degrees and it would just shoot off. So for average, a good, 20 degrees is a good starting point. Bigger stuff go lower. Stuff with better thruster rate, you go higher. So this launch detect time here of 40, you shouldn't really change this. This is the default and it's actually a good number. So what this is the amount of time it takes to actually detect whether it's a launch or something's just knocked the plane or something like that. So I believe, again, it's in milliseconds. So what that means is it needs to sustain this G-force for this amount of time before it says, yes, that's a launch. So that's a good number. There's no real reason to change that. Right, so the next thing we're going to look at is the launch timeout, which is in milliseconds again, and default is 5,000, which is 5 seconds. And this is the amount of time that the model will climb in launch mode. So I've set mine to 15 seconds because it takes to get to the altitude that I want. It's going to take that amount of time. You could set it to 0, in which case it won't time out. So it's really not a good idea. So you want this set, but maybe around 10 seconds is a good starting point. The next one is the launch maximum altitude. Now, this is very similar. It's basically the height that it will get to before a timeout. You don't have to set this. You can just use it on a timer. But I've set mine up to just under the legal limit in this country for altitude of model aircraft. So the limit is 400 feet, which is about 122-ish meters. And I believe I've set this to, it's probably about 395 feet, something like that, maybe a little bit higher. Yeah, again, you don't need to set it. If you set it to 0, it will just time out when the timer does. And when it times out, it goes into whatever flight mode you've got selected at the time. So if you enable launch mode and then move it to loiter, once the launch times out, it will start loitering. But yeah, that's all we're really going to look at here. As I say, I was in the first video, I actually changed this down from 1700. 1600 is what I'm going to try tomorrow. So what I'm going to do now is show how you actually go about testing this. So what we're going to do is head on over to the outputs page. One thing you should note is you need to understand that the risks of the props are on and it is dangerous. So please take all precautions you can when doing this. If it's a bigger model, get someone else to help you. So maybe you hold the model, because obviously you don't want to chop someone else up, and get them to slowly raise this. But what in essence we're going to do is look for this number here or here. either of the two. And that's going to give us our launch throttle level. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to set up something to record the aircraft, and then we'll be right back. Right, so what we're going to need is our model. It just needs to be hooked up to iNav. We need the battery, ideally the one for the model. Mine's in the flight box, so I'm using this one. This is still a free cell, so it will do what I need. But if you use the correct battery, it will be the right weight. So what we need it an iNav. What we need to do, which when I recorded, I did the first time I did it, and I didn't change it back. But what you should do is just add in a random channel into the manual flight mode, and where it's in the middle, it means as soon as we plug the battery in, it will be in manual, so we won't get the stabilization noises and the servos grinding about. So have that in manual, and then head on over to the outputs, plug your battery in, I'll rest that in there. And what we want to do is make sure we get the USB cable away from the propeller. So we don't want to chop anything up. So all we're going to do is hold the model like this, and then we're just going to apply power and wait for it to start lifting. So if we enable the motors, and I already know that it feels like it's going to lift at about 1450 on this. So I think even the 1600 is really high. But if you slowly build it up, just bounce it. Yeah, I can feel it lifting there. So that's fairly neutral there. If I let go, I don't think it would fall down. At that point, it's definitely pushing against my hand, so that will be fine for a launch. So that's what I'm thinking. 1500 would be absolutely fine for a launch. My arm is just resting. It's actually pushing it up. So yeah, as you could see, I think I'll be able to lower this on the field to about 1500. You can just, what you want to do is feel for the plane when it starts getting light and then starts pushing your hand up. When it's just starting to push your hand up, that is the number that you want to take note of here. And obviously, you know, I'd round it maybe up to the nearest 50, and then go for that as your starting position. So what I'm going to do now is disable the motors. We head back into modes. Don't forget to remove that and save it, because otherwise you'll be stuck in manual the whole time. Well, whatever that switch is for. So that's my arm switch. So that's how you do it. And then you just go into CLI, and I'll show you. So if you do get FW launch, so it's this one here. You just want the nav throttle equals, then set, paste that in. So as I say, I reckon I could do 1550 and it would be absolutely fine. I'm going to leave it as 1600 just and lower it on the field. So then you would obviously type save, enter that, and then that would be done. So that's how you set up launch mode. So in a few seconds, you'll see how this goes at the field. I'm not going to do anything to it. All I'm going to do is put in a 3S battery, stick it in launch mode, have the GoPro on my head, and throw it. So whatever the results of this are, you will see it in this video in a few seconds. So I shall see you shortly. Hi guys, I've just got to the field. The wind is coming from that sort of direction. It's not as bad as the other day, but I've literally just got here. Nothing else has been done, just got set up so you get to see the first launch with the launch settings. So there we go, we're on the right model. Plug that in. First switch on, not got satellites yet, so let's give it a few minutes and then we'll just chuck it, see what happens. So while we're waiting for the satellites, a quick recap. I've got everything set up using Mark Hoffman's guide. I've lowered the throttle to 16,000 or 1600, sorry. Just to see if we can get a launch with less throttle. Right, we're getting closer. We're actually picked up, there we go, 6 satellites. Alright, so let's give it a go. Alright, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this in the GoPro. So, I'm going to hold it from the wing. I've got launch mode on a switch. Just turn the sound on, you'll hear it. Alright, so launch mode. I'm going to arm it, which I need to use my other hand, so let's try and look down. Raise the throttle. Now I'm just going to throw it. Yeah, I might put that back up. It did it fine, but it was better last time. So I'm going to disable launch mode. But as you can see, it's up. There's no real issues and it's flying fine. But yeah, I will put it back up. And you see, no problem at all.
Cruise, loiter, return to home, return to launch, loiter.
So let's get that loitering and time to get in the goggles. So I'm back at the desk now and I've watched the video for the first time, and it really highlights how good it is to just record stuff sometimes. Because what you've obviously heard is I thought maybe the launch throttle was too low and to put it back to 1700. But watching the video again, I'm thinking I'm actually going to take a different route. I'm going to put it back to 1600. I did raise it for the rest of the flights, but after watching the video, I don't think that that's the problem. So if we watch this again, I'll go through it. I'm going to play it back in slow motion so we can get an idea of what's going on. Right, so the plane's just been thrown. As you can see, it's a decent angle up, but it drops pretty quickly. So I'm actually thinking that there's two things wrong here. I think firstly, I could have a bit more idle throttle, which will keep the momentum a bit higher, but also I can reduce the motor delay, maybe reduce that. I think I've got it set to 150. So maybe if I drop it down to 100, it will kick the motor in a bit sooner and it won't dip so far. So the problem isn't the power it's got to get out of that situation, it's how long it takes to get out of that situation. So that's what I'm going to try next time. I'm going to drop the motor delay to 100. I'm going to increase the idle to 1400, maybe 1350, 1400, but I'm also going to increase the climb angle to 25 degrees so that when it drops, it will try and get up a bit steeper as well. So that is basically how you set up auto launch. As you can see, there's a lot of things that you can do to try and get a good start on it, but there is a little bit of playing with it too, but it works really well. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using that method of auto launch. There's no need to shake and bake, just get it set up right and it's all good. So that's where I'm going to leave it today. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. If you've enjoyed the video, a thumbs up will be great. If you hated it, thumbs down. But if you do a thumbs down, please leave a comment and let me know how I can improve it. If you are interested in more videos, please subscribe, and clicking the notification bell will alert you when the next videos in the series come out. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and get out there and fly these models like you've stoned them. Fly them like you've stole them. Have fun, guys. It's what this is all about. Take care. Bye.